Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. A very important day has come to Europe. Most notably, elections in one of the most important countries in Europe, period, Germany. There have been snap elections called in Germany after the previous Chancellor's Olaf Scholz government has collapsed due to the internal strife between the coalition parties. And now, as we know some of the results from the exit polls of Germany, we can clearly say that we have a winner. And I want to say congratulations to Germany, congratulations to Europe, congratulations to Ukraine, and most importantly, of course, congratulations to Friedrich Merz. This is a very dominant performance by the CDU-CSU, the center-right party in Germany. And already now we can look at the published exit polls, which are still being updated. So this is not final results, most notably. But we already can generally see what's going to be the composition of the parliament like. Let's get the saddest part off the way first and foremost, which is that the second place with the very strong showing as well has taken the AfD, Alternative for Germany. It's a far-right German party, and if you know anything about the history of Europe, then you know for sure that right-wing and Germany do not mix well for anyone. Whenever there is a far-right party in Germany, everyone is going to suffer at the end. So obviously, them performing this strong is not to benefit of anyone, but in generally speaking, no one is really acknowledging that they want to form a coalition with them. The CDU-CSU have speculated that potentially they can work on some questions with the far-right party. This has caused a wave of disapproval throughout Germany. However, the fact that Merz party has won and actually did a pretty big showing in some parts of Germany that are being contested, that means that potentially there is this question and agenda that needs tackling. Most notably because European politics and German politics as well have been very much dominated with the question of immigration. And there has been a lot of different narratives that have been talked about during these times. And most notably, the far right parties are proposing a very simple solution to the immigrant question. Now, if you know anything about far right, then their solutions are always simple. It's just they're maybe not the most ethical ones. Then tackling the other parties, there are two things that we need to consider over here, which is the left. The left is a left-wing, far-left party in Germany, and they're also very pro-Russian. So anyone that is following the horseshoe theory, you have some working materials here because they do favor Putin a lot. Beyond that, there's a party that's called BSW. In Germany, there's a 5% barrier for party to get any seats in the parliament. So if the party is not reaching 5%, then they will not be represented in the parliament. So it would be much more beneficial for us in Europe and Friedrich Merz if the BSW party would not cross that 5% barrier. Therefore, as the exit polls get more and more precise, as we get more information, we should look out for the BSW party participation and whether or not they will cross the 5% barrier. Secondly, there is the FDP party. It's a liberal democratic party of Germany. They are for free trade. They have their own weird agenda, but the point is they're still pro-Ukraine. So if the FDP gets into the German parliament, that is okay. And then the potential coalition partners for Germany. There are two. There are, as shown by their color, the Green Party. The Green Party, they are towards left-leaning, but they are very, very tough on Putin and dictatorship. Arguably, of all of the parties presented in the parliament, Greens have been the most stoic ones against Russian invasion in Ukraine, and they have been very strict on Putin, and they have been really pushing towards more solid and concrete actions against the aggressor and more support for Ukraine. The unfortunate situation is that in CDU-CSU, there are a lot of representatives that just hate the guts of some of the people within the Green Party, and more specifically, the leader of the Green Party. So the coalition between these two it's probably not very likely. Moreover, if we would just consider the count of how many seats they would get, they would actually be 17 seats short for majority. Therefore, the chances for the coalition with the Greens, I wouldn't say that it's very likely. Most likely, what we're going to see is either the CDU, CSU are going to be left as a minority government, or they will enter something that is called a grand coalition, where the center-right CDU, CSU will be in a coalition that's center-left SPD, the Social Democrats of Germany. This coalition has worked before, and it's not going to be very surprising if it will be working again. The problem with that is that in SPD, there is a lot of desire that is expressed by the likes of Scholz, which is don't do anything, just let the ball rolling, like just follow the narratives that are presented to us by the United States, and let's just see how it worked out. Let's just do nothing. And you know that, in my perspective, the do nothing mentality has been the bane of our existence. And it's been pretty much dominant by the stuff that was coming out from a lot of the representatives of the SPD and Scholz himself. However, notably, because Scholz and his SPD party lost so bad, this puts forward a question: who will be the new leader of the party? It's not yet confirmed that Olaf Scholz will step down, but it's not a far-fetched to consider. And right now, the most popular politician on the SPD party is someone that is named Boris Pistorius. Boris Pistorius were the Minister of Defense in the previous government. And Boris Pistorius actually was quite more aggressive against the Russians and was calling for more action against Russia and in support for Ukraine. So if we're talking about what this election gives us in a perspective for Ukraine, I think that given the environment that we find ourselves in, given about the fact that the far-right movements have been pushed and promoted on all fronts by some of the most powerful men in this world, it's actually a great result, and I'm very happy to see that Germany has not failed us, and we're going to be looking into more support for Ukraine, and hopefully Friedrich Merz is going to commit to his promise of delivering Taurus missiles to Ukraine. Let's move on to some more good news for Ukraine. The EU Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis, which is now going to be responsible for economy, productivity, and simplification of the European Union, has been quite dominant in his recent press conference and speech, which I listened through fully. It was obviously very dry because he's a full-blown bureaucrat, but he also was the Prime Minister of Latvia, so I know him, well, not personally, but like I know him very well. Beforehand, this person was responsible for everything financials inside of the European Union. Now he's going to be responsible for cutting the red tape. And he specifically talked about this extensively. The biggest problem for European Union, if we're talking about doing anything for Ukraine, it is actually not the money, not the resources. There's plenty of things that European Union can do. European Union is really, really rich. We have a lot of money. I believe total savings that were mentioned was about 1.8 trillion euros. Insane amount of money that could be spent to boost our economy and our production capabilities. The biggest problem was always the super intense bureaucracy. And Valdis Dombrovskis is now going to be heading the full charge, and he's putting forward the desire that they will be cutting a lot of red tape, simplifying, digitalizing, and removing a lot of the unnecessary paperwork to make the European Union more efficient. This is great news, and this is exactly the kind of developments that I was hoping to see. So a lot of digitalization is going to be expected, and that means that a lot of the processes within the European Union are going to get faster. And as you have already read the headline of this article over here, then he also made some statements on Russia. And because this person is has been responsible for a lot of the financials beforehand in Europe and now is also responsible for the economy, then Russia is getting absolutely nothing from the European Union. Moreover, he has been emphasizing that there's going to be even more help for Ukraine. So the economic aspect of the European Union has been committed to help Ukraine more. And this is especially important because of the weird relationships that we are now having with the United States. Now, I'm not going to be covering what Trump says. There's plenty of channels that are doing it. I'm pretty sure a lot of you are actually tired. What I will be talking about is the things that will influence the Europe and Ukraine here. And it's kind of bizarre what happened just now, because the Polish president went to US to meet with Donald Trump, and Poland for the last 30 years to say it was a big advocate of the United States inside Europe is not even closely stating how far Poland went out of their way to just promote United States and never do anything that would come in any kind of confrontation with the United States. So they were a big promoter, one of the best allies that United States have in Europe. And instead of the planned hour, the meeting that was supposed to be between the President Duda and Donald Trump, they dedicated him 10 minutes. 30 years of effort, 10 minutes of the time that the Trump was ready to give their best representatives in Europe, period. Especially because Poland was the country that was the front runner in spending on their defense. It was the front runner at buying specifically American-produced equipment. It just underscores once again that all of those critics that the spending is not sufficient is nothing else than just talking point. Poland is not a dictatorship. They're not worshiping the far right. Therefore, they're bad. There was a big event that was ongoing just now where a lot of the representatives of the Ukrainian heads of states were speaking with journalists and talking about what's planned for year 2025 and how they would aim to tackle the war. And President Zelensky had a lengthy discussion with a lot of the questions. And there was going to be a lot of sound bites. I already have some, but the most important one that probably is going to be pulled in every single media and is going to be twisted and turned in a ways that you would not expect, is that President Zelensky has stated that if there would be an offer on the table that the war is going to be over, that the NATO countries will provide security for Ukraine and Ukraine will join the NATO union, then the Zelensky said, at that moment, I could easily just quit being the president and would be ready to give up my presidency just to see that Ukraine is safe. Obviously, it was just soundbited, and everyone says President Zelensky willing to give up presidency in exchange for NATO memberships. If I know anything about media, then the last part, in exchange for NATO membership, is going to disappear the next couple of days, and the only thing that is going to be talked about from all different sources is that Zelensky is willing to give up his presidency. So my word of advice, if you see this, correct it anywhere you can see, because otherwise we're gonna again tackle the disinformation that Zelensky is already ready to give up. Then Zelensky also commented a little bit on the agreement that was proposed by the Trump's team. He states that what he is looking for is an agreement that would be a win-win for Ukraine, something that could only be beneficial for both parties, for businesses and people, and he really is very solid on his position. So if you were worried that Ukraine could be presented with a bad deal and then they would sign the bad deal, do not worry. Zelensky understands it quite well, and he states that his team is working intensively with the Trump's administration to see if they can get a good deal. And thank you so much, Dmitry from Word Translated, for adding subtitles to that video. Then PSO1 is also mentioning that Zelensky talks about how the Ukrainian weapon productions are ongoing. They stated that last year they made 154 artillery systems, which is more than all NATO countries combined, at least judging by the data of the last year. He also said that they were planning to make 1 million drones last year, but made actually 2.2 million drones and another 100,000 long-range strategic strike drones. And he promised for Russia that it's only going to get worse as there are going to be more and more drones produced for Ukraine. By this point, the reports are that 85% of the damages inflicted on the Russian forces are done by the Ukrainian drones. So if you were worrying about the fact that Ukraine might lose its battle capabilities if US will put full support, do not worry. Ukraine is going to be doing a lot to still inflict massive damages on Russia. Another point about Zelensky was recently promptly dismissed, which is that Zelensky could have 4% approval rating. There are agencies that are tracking Zelensky's approval rating non-stop, and they posted some new data suggesting that after the comments about 4% approval and confrontation with the USA, there has been a surge and rally around the flag effect around Zelensky, and his approval right now has risen to 65%. And so far, we see that it's potentially rising even more. People have been commenting generally positively in how Zelensky presented himself in that big conference that is associated with the 3 years unfortunate anniversary of the Russian full-scale invasion into Ukraine. Let's get to some terrible news for Russia. Suddenly, it's being reported that Russia lost somewhere 100 tons of gold from their National Wealth Fund. National Wealth Fund is the Russian war chest. This is where Putin has accumulated a lot of his money that would pay for the expenses of waging this war. But obviously, these 100 tons did not really disappear. They were spent. They were spent to sustain the Russian economy and the Russian war machine. Because Prune here, and shout out to Prune on Blue Sky, absolutely incredible. He has been tracking the Russian National Wealth Fund for a while. He has this chart where he sees the distribution in the National Wealth Fund. So if we look closely, this is where we are at the end of the year 2021, so prior to Russian invasion, and all the way into middle of the 2022. You can see these different colored lines. This is the National Wealth Fund. So the white one is the Japanese yen, the yellow one is gold in kilograms, and then the red one is a Chinese yuan, and then the other ones are also a little bit represented. And as we kind of go along with our timeline here, let me move myself just a little bit. As we go down with this timeline here, you can see that by the end of January of 2025, you can see that the only thing that is left in this liquid part of the Russian National Wealth Fund is 178 tons of gold and 164 billion Chinese yuan. That's it. That's everything that Russia has in their war chest. Compare it to when it was full and what it is now. It is pitiful. So when we were talking about, and people were stating, Georgie, how long Russia can do it, and I always stated that it's going to depend if Russia runs out of money. And what this chart is telling us is that Russia basically run out of money because this amount barely covers 2025 for Russia. And people are worried that if the United States will lift sanctions, then suddenly Russian economy just blows up and it's all good and it's sunshine and roses. The problem of that is that Ukraine, what Zelensky said, that Ukraine is producing drones, and these drones are inflicting serious damages, so-called kinetic sanctions, on the Russian economy. So that is not really going away. European Union is not lifting sanctions. We touched upon this. And you already see what point I'm getting at. Because even if Russia has a little bit of the wealth fund left, even if they can cover for 2025, the problem is that there's still enough pressure on the Russian economy. And most important pressure of all, something that Russia just cannot escape, period, is the sanctions of war. To wage war, a country needs 3 things: money, money, and money. Russia, despite any sanctions potentially being lifted, is just physically running out of money. Now, obviously, there's complex economic systems, printing of money, and so on. But the point is that the Russian economy is going to be starting survival mode after this is out. And then finally, everyone knows that right now we are seeing the fourth year of this full-scale invasion of Russians beginning. And to commemorate that, there has been events that have been organized by the Ukrainian World Congress. I'm going to leave a link to this site in the descriptions and in the first comment of the video. There are still events ongoing all across the world. Please open this map, find your country, find events that are happening maybe around you, and please come out and show the support for Ukraine that you have. I really like this picture taken from the Czech Republic. I believe it was in the city of Prague, where the people came and they made a Ukrainian flag with the colored, I believe, leaflets that they just put on above their heads. It's an incredible message to send to all of Ukrainians that we are supporting them. There's still people supporting it. And obviously, if you want to support with something more, if you can support with something more, participate in fundraiser. We have our own fundraiser here, but any fundraisers that gets some vehicles or equipment to Ukrainian armed forces or help Ukrainians cope with this awful invasion, now this is this is necessary more than ever, just to get Ukrainians to understand that despite the political atmosphere, we are still here. We are supporting Ukraine and we are loving Ukraine. Support Ukrainian armed forces. I love you. Slava Ukraini. And I'll see you next time.